Hello friends, I hope you're having a great day and you are ready for an introduction to Azure Data Factory. Today we are going to implement a teeny tiny, very simple data pipeline. But what is Azure Data Factory in the first place? Based on the documentation, and I quote, it's a cloud ETL service for data integration and data transformation. It offers a code-free user interface for building ETL or ELT processes and data pipelines in general. It allows you to create data-driven workflows for orchestrating data movement and transforming data at scale. Azure Data Factory is composed of 6 parts. Pipelines. A pipeline is a logical grouping of activities. Activities. An activity represents a processing step in a pipeline. Dataset. A dataset represents a data structure. Linked services. A linked service provides the connection that is needed for Azure Data Factory to connect to external resources. Data flows. A data flow actually is a graph where we can apply data transformation logic. And integration runtimes. Now that's a bit tricky because this is a new concept, but integration runtimes essentially provide the bridge between the activity and the linked services. It's the compute infrastructure used by Azure Data Factory to provide data integration capabilities. A good definition about integration runtimes I came across recently on the web was to think Data Factory as the delivery manager and integration runtime as the delivery man that executes the pipeline. Now let me share some slides I found on Azure documentation that you might find helpful. This is a diagram of what Azure Data Factory provides as a service. We have the ingest component, so we can ingest data from various different sources. We have control flow, where we can design code-free data pipelines. We have data flow, which allow us to apply transformation logic on our data. We have a scheduler in order to schedule our jobs. And we have the monitor that allow us to actually monitor our pipelines, and we can keep the pipeline history and check the data flow execution. On the next slide, we can see a diagram of how Data Factory works. So a pipeline is a logical grouping of activities which run through linked service. And then here we have the data. An activity produces a dataset or consumes a dataset. And actually, dataset represents a data item stored in a linked service. This is a very generic diagram of. Moving on, we have integration runtimes. I'm going to focus a little bit more here because it took me a while to get it personally. An integration runtime specifies what kind of hardware is used to execute activities, where the hardware is physically located, who owns and maintains the hardware, and which data stores and services the hardware can connect to. There are 3 types of integration runtimes. Azure Integration Runtime is managed by Microsoft. So Microsoft is doing all the patching, the scaling, and the maintenance. The integration runtime can only access data stores and services in public networks. So when do you use Azure Integration Runtime? When you want to copy data between cloud stores. When you want to transform data between cloud stores using data flows. Or when you execute activities using cloud stores and services. Then we have self-hosted integration runtime. The infrastructure and the hardware is managed by you this time. You will need to address all the patching, the scaling, and the maintenance. The integration runtime can access resources in both public and private networks. So when you use self-hosted integration runtime, when you want to copy data between cloud and on-premises stores, or when you want to copy data between on-premises stores only, or when you want to execute activities using on-premises stores and services. And last but not least, we have Azure SSIS Integration Runtime, which are actually VMs running the SSIS engine, which allow us to execute SSIS packages. Obviously, you want to use Azure SSIS Integration Runtime when you want to execute SSIS packages through Azure Data Factory. This is a Data Factory pipeline. As we mentioned, think of Azure Data Factory as the delivery manager. Azure Integration Runtime is missing from this diagram, but think of it as the delivery man that provides the infrastructure that executes the pipeline. First, we need to orchestrate a pipeline here that loads a CSV file from Blob storage, then use link service in order to create a connection. Then we create a dataset. We use the copy activity, we produce another dataset, and through the link service that provides connection to the database, we save the data into a table. We are going to implement this example right now. First, we will need to create a link service that allows Data Factory to access Blob storage. Then a dataset, which references the target CSV file in Blob storage. A link service that allows Data Factory to access the SQL Server database. Then a dataset again, which references the target table in the SQL Server database. And last but not least, a copy activity that will copy the data from the first dataset to the second. But enough talking for today, so it's time for some action, and let's move to Azure Portal. First things first, now we need to create a data factory. If you don't have it on your menu, just type on the search bar Data Factory, and you will see it right here where it says Data Factories. Hit that button, and now it's time to create a new data factory. Let's click on Create, hit the Create button here. Wait for a second, my internet is very slow, apologies about that. We provide a subscription, that's my subscription, a resource group, let's say this one. Let's call it Data Factory Demo App. Actually, I'm in West Europe, version 2. Be careful with that, you want version 2. Configuration Git, configure Git later. Networking, you don't have to do anything, leave everything as it is. Connect via public endpoint, yeah, that's fine. Advanced, yeah. Tags, we don't need any tags. Click Review and Create. It performs some validations and it's ready to be created. It will take, usually takes a minute or two, it doesn't take long. And the deployment has started. We are waiting for it to deploy the resource. Here it is, perfect. Click on the Go to Resource and you will see here Data Factory Studio in the overview blade on the left side. If you click Launch Studio, it's going to open Azure Data Factory Studio, and here is where we will apply all the transformations. Give it a second. Finally, here we are. This is Data Factory Studio. This is the screen you will see the first time. That's underneath Home tab. You will have here all these services that Data Factory provides: ingest, orchestrate, transform data, configure SIS. But for us, click on the pencil where it says Author on the left side, expand pipelines. You will see we don't have anything. So we click the Add button here, the plus button. Underneath pipelines, we can choose Create a pipeline. And here you will see, here we are going to create our first pipeline. Now, before we do that, first we need a storage account. Why do we need a storage account? Because we need a source where we have data. Leave Data Factory, the studio as it is, and move to Azure Portal. Click on Home and click on Storage Accounts. If you don't have it, type it here, Storage Accounts. We are going to create a blob storage. Click on the Create button here. We select our Azure subscription here, our resource group. It's better if you use the same resource group you used in order to build Data Factory. Storage account name, let's say Data Factory Demo. Okay, let's add my initials, Apple, and then I'm in West Europe. Here we are, standard. leave everything as it is, redundancy, geo redundant storage, that's fine. Next. Everything is fine here, requires REST API, public access, enable storage account keys. Do not click enable hierarchical namespace because that will create a data lake. We just want blob storage. We don't hierarchy here. Networking, enable public access, that's fine. Microsoft Network routing, this is fine as well. And enable soft deletes, yeah, that's fine. Encryption, we leave everything as it is here, tags, and then review. It is running the final validation. We click on create, and this will create a storage account where we will upload a CSV file that we will use as a source. It will take a couple of minutes. This is our storage account now. You can see we are on the overview tab. It has all the information about our storage account. We go under containers and we are going to create a container. Click on the container button, type your container name, that would be Data Factory container. Public access level, just blob ones, because we want to be able to access this blob storage, this container actually. And here we are going to upload the CSV file. So we click on upload. I'm going to upload the CSV file with vehicle data, just a few records, nothing complicated because we want to keep it simple. Let me find this file. Here it is. We click on upload and it was successfully uploaded. Here we have, click on the CSV file and there is a way to check the data. Click on the edit button and you will be able to see the data here. Oops, I spotted a mistake. This comma does not belong here. We click on save. We make the change. We click on save. Everything is fine. Now we need to create our SQL database because storage account would be our source. Now we need a destination and that would be a database. I have SQL database here, but if you don't, just click on the search bar and type SQL database and hit on the SQL database button icon here. Let's create a database. So click on create SQL database. We need to provide an Azure subscription and a resource group. I suggest you use the same resource group as the one that you have created the storage account. Database name, let's say Data Factory demo. Server, I have already created the server, but if you don't, you can click on create new, enter server name. Actually, let's create a new one, demo Data Factory server West Europe, West EU, and then authentication. Click on SQL authentication, add the password. For me it would be like something like that because it's a demo, and type a password here and confirm the password, right? And everything would be fine. Actually you need to provide a more valid password like this one. Anyway, I'm not going to create it again because I have already created it. Must match. Okay, what did I do wrong? Fine, you click on create and that would create an SQL database server. Now back to our database. Discard this for me, not for you. And we select our server, we select, want to use SQL Elastic Pool? No. Workload environment, click on development. Compute and storage, general purpose, serverless. Actually, if you click on the configure database, there are many options to configure your database. Now, for me, because this is a demo, we can use the DTU based purchasing model. which is based on the database units. So you will be charged based on the database units that you have consumed. This is the cheapest option, and let me minimize the cost here by using the data max size. Everything looks fine. We are going to create an SQL database of £4 for USD, actually $4.90, because we are very generous people here, and we click on apply. Then we use the backup storage, geo redundant, that's fine, networking. If you don't use that, I will show you what you will do afterwards to solve this issue. So leave it as it is, next security, leave it as it is, we don't need to do anything, and review and create. And this, click the create button, and this will create our database, which would be our destination. Click on the resource button once done deploying the resource. Go to resource. Here we have our SQL database. Give it a few seconds. It will take a bit to load, but you can see all the configurations here, how we can create. We created the SQL database, connection strings, server name, etc., etc., the status. But hit on the query editor preview here. In order to access our database and create a table that we are going to store our data, the data that we are going to take from the CSV, we need to create a table first. So we need to access the database. The first time you log on, you try to log on, it's going to give you probably an error. It says you cannot open Azure Data Factory demo requested by the login. Client IP address is not allowed to access the server. What you can do here in order to solve this issue, because your IP is not in the whitelist, you click on the overview button, move to the overview button, then we are going under the firewall rules, click on the set server firewall, and here we are going to add our IP in the whitelist, so we would be able to access our SQL database. Scroll down and click under firewall rules, click add your client IPv4 address. Click on save. It's going to create a rule that allows your IP address to have access to the database. Then go back again onto our query editor. Sorry about that, I missed one step. Query editor here, preview, and let's log in into our SQL server. Sorry about the delay. I'm not working on my laptop, neither my internet, so my internet connection is not the best. Anyway, but let's create one table here, and we can do that. I have the create table statement. Let me copy that. We are going to create a table called vehicle. We have VIN, varchar, country, city, state, postal code, model year, make and model. Everything is varchar except for the model year, which is an integer. So highlight this, click run, and we created a vehicle table. In order to test that, write a select from the vehicle and run this query. It's not going to return anything, just to verify the table is there, and underneath tables you would be able to see it, tbo.vehicle. Perfect. Now back to Data Factory Studio. We have our resource and we have our sink, now our target table. Now it's time to copy the data from source to the target table. The first thing we need to do is to create a dataset. Underneath datasets, we don't have anything, so it's time to create a new dataset. And click on storage. We don't have, well, if I type it right, store Azure Blob storage. Click on that, continue. We want a CSV file, continue. Let's call it source data. And then for link service, we don't have a link service. Remember, a link service provides the connection between Data Factory and external resources. And now we are going to create a link service. Let's call it Azure Blob Storage Linked Service. And we need to connect via integration runtime. Here it's provided by Microsoft, the auto-resolve integration runtime. We leave it as it is. Authentication type, account key. This is not the right way. Usually you need to use a service principal or a system assigned managed identity. But for now, for the demo, we use account key. We select the subscription, the storage account name underneath this subscription, and we click on test on connection. We need to test the connection. It says connection successful, so before you hit the create button, always test the connection. We click on create, and this is going to create an Azure linked service. Now we have our Data Factory has access to our storage account. And here we use the link service that we created, and underneath file path, we have to click on the browse and provide the container path that we have the CSV file. So it's underneath the root folder, Data Factory container, and now it's going to load the CSV file. We click on OK, and then again OK. Now we point to this CSV file, and now we have this connection to our data source. A very cool feature provided on Data Factory is that you can click on preview data, and it's going to show you the data here. We have all those columns. Actually, I think I need to add a header, encoding, row delimiter, first row as header. Click on that, and let's preview the data again. Now it's the correct one. We have the column names here, and underneath we have the data. Everything looks perfect. Back to our pipeline. So we need to create a data set for our target table. Let's go again underneath datasets, click on new dataset, click on SQL Database, Azure SQL Database, click on continue. We need to create a link service again in order to have access to our SQL database. Again, we leave that as it is, Azure SQL Database linked service. We leave the integration runtime as auto-resolve integration runtime, and account, we need a connection string, and we need Azure subscription, server name, factory demo. Everything is provided on the drop-down demo. If you drop-down menu, if you have already created the resources like we did. The database name here, SQL authentication, username, just provide the username for your SQL server and your password. Well, it takes some time for me, and then we click on test connection. We are getting an error, so let's see what the error says. It says that the database firewall does not allow our integration runtime to access the database. So let's move back to our SQL database under overview, under set firewall. Settings here, networking and public access, and scroll down underneath exceptions where it says allow Azure services and resources to access the server. We tick that, we click save. We go back to our data factory and we try to test the connection again. See what happens. Connection successful. Perfect. Now we have access to our database from our data factory. We successfully created our linked service. And now we need to provide our table name, which is the dbo.vehicle. We click on OK. And we have our second data set. If you preview the data, probably it would be empty. Yeah, we don't have any data. This is fine. Now that we have our two data sets and our two linked services, we have the source and the target. It's time to copy the data from source to target. You move underneath, move and transform, click on the copy data, move that into our space here. And as you can see, we have our source. Actually, we have the general copy vehicle data, and that's the name we provide. Then underneath source, we need to select our source data set, select source data. Everything is fine here. We can preview the data again here as well. And we have the data. Under sync now, we have to provide our target dataset, which is this one. Insert, that's fine. And mappings, let's import the schema and see what happens. Apparently it will give you everything as a string, I think. Yeah, except for country. Didn't like it for some reason. Country, yeah, I have it with capital letters at the target table. Postal code here. Postal code, yep, fine. And make and model year. Now remember, model year at the target database, it's not a string, so it's an integer. Let's trigger our pipeline now so we can test it. First, we need to click on the publish all. Click publish. It's publishing, it is deploying the changes. So before we actually be able to run our pipeline, we have to publish the changes. Okay, now that we have published our changes, we click on the add trigger and trigger now. Click on OK. And this is going to run our pipeline. View pipeline run, so we can see what is running. We successfully run our pipeline. I ran it twice accidentally, but you can see now that we have two runs, but you can see the latest one here. It successfully finished. Now if we go back, we can select this time the debug mode. It's even better. You click on debug, but you have first to enable. It will take a bit of time and it's going to charge you. But here you will see, if you refresh, if you click here on this page, you click on output, it's going to give you the pipeline run on the debug mode, and you will see it successfully finished. You click on the glasses here and you can see that it finished successfully, and it says, various information about your copy activity here, and that it finished successfully. Now how can we check that we actually moved data from our source to our destination? We need to go back to our SQL database to select from the table and see that we have data. So you go back home, you click on the SQL database, and under query editor on the left panel, the blade that says query editor again. Now bear in mind that this is an editor on Azure portal. It's not the best editor. Don't worry, there are more options here when you actually want to develop stuff and check your data, but this is just a quick way to actually see what is happening in our table. Here is our editor. Click on tables and you will see our table here, which is the dbo.vehicle. Click on the three dots, select the top 1000 records, highlight the query and click run, or sometimes it automatically runs, and this will give you can see all the data here. We run the pipeline multiple times, that's why you see more records than the source, but the pipeline is working successfully. This is all for today, guys. We successfully created a data pipeline on Azure Data Factory. A very simple pipeline apparently, but it's good enough to demonstrate how it works. This is the basic step. Using Azure Data Factory to copy the copy activity is a very basic step. In another video we will go more in depth about it, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, click the like button and subscribe to the channel.